Resident Evil 4 is a masterpiece. Man, what can I say about this game that hasn't been said already? This game is absolutely amazing. Now, as someone who was around when the original Resident Evil 4 was released, I have to say, not only does this one does the original justice, but at times, in my personal opinion, it actually does some things a little bit better. Such as the QTEs, for one thing. A lot of the QTEs that we had in the original have been removed and have been done in a more real-time gameplay fashion. And by that I mean you're actually playing it out as if it was a cutscene. You're not just hitting a button prompt. You actually have to time stuff, especially with Leon does his parry system. Or you have to get the strikes right, or you have to get this right. I absolutely love it. And I have to say, overall, this game is just great. Now, I've made some recent videos of a lot of the Resident Evil games that have come out. And I actually wasn't going to make one about this because I didn't really have much to say. So this is definitely going to be a short video. The game's tight from from beginning to end. I think everything's done better. I think even characters are portrayed better. Luis has gotten more screen time. Ashley actually has development a little bit. Not like she was all that bad in the original, but man, does she make you really feel the pain of doing an escort mission. And here she's actually done much better. They removed the health system from her. She feels less like a damsel in distress. She actually feels, I wouldn't say too helpful. I mean, she doesn't hold a gun or do anything like that. But she's not as annoying and doesn't feel like she needs your protection every waking moment. You could just say, "Hey, Ashley, back up a moment here," or follow me closely, which is a new system, rather than just have Ashley just close to you all the time. But if you tell her to back off, give you some space, she would actually do her best to stay out of the enemy's grasp. And if anything, that's actually a better way of tackling different moments, is having Ashley just kind of hang back and just, you know, sort of do her own thing while you handle the bigger threat.
I won't run. Wait for me, Leon.
And I gotta say, I love that. As I mentioned, the QTEs are gone, which I feel was always kind of like in, well, it definitely felt like in 2000s way of doing gameplay. And it's nice to see that games are actually moving away from that sort of thing. Minus Sonic Frontiers, which I actually think I brought up in the Sonic Frontiers video. But I really like how it feels as though we're progressing to a state where games have come so far, where the gameplay itself can actually hold on its own as if it was a cutscene, and you don't need like those, and it can be just as cinematic. And sure, you can mix it with like cutscene moments, but you don't actually need to sort of force that on people. You know, it's something like, hey, look, you just play this yourself, and you have to get the parry system down right, and you have to make sure like that you strike in a smart way, and it's all done in a very smart way, what's the word term I'm looking for? Cohesive way. It all works. It all just works well. Whereas in the original, yeah, it was made in what, 2004, 2005-ish. So it's kind of understandable how the gameplay was the way it was. And if anything, the original actually still kind of holds up. But this Resident Evil 4 remake modernizes the gameplay, bringing it along the lines of the rest of the remakes, or even something as a lot of the newer Resident Evil games have done. And going off of some of the recent remakes that I've actually taken a look at, such as Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, this is definitely my favorite. of the remakes. No doubt, 100%. 100%. Definitely my favorite of the remakes. I'll definitely give this a solid 10 out of 10. I'm sorry. I don't think there's necessarily anything that's too wrong with this. And I could say something like, oh, well, the music is it's kind of, it may not be as impactful or something like that, but then the game gives you the option to actually have the original music. Like, you can actually get the original soundtrack again as a feature. So it's like, man, even when I'm trying to think of something like that, it still manages to impress me. It still manages to do something well. I really like what they was able to create here with remaking Resident Evil 4. There's even a little bit of a stealth system. Now that's something I didn't actually think that I would see in a Resident Evil game work particularly well. I definitely have to give him credit for that. Because Resident Evil 4 didn't seem like the type of game that would actually benefit from any stealth elements. And of course you can use them just to get like a little bit of a leg up in a battle before like the initial fight starts. And it does help in certain situations. Although it's not used all the time, I still try to use it anywhere I can. There's actually were a couple of areas later on in the game that I was actually able to wipe out everybody in a certain area. Now, there are places where you just can't avoid getting into a firefight, but there are a couple of places here or there when you can actually, if done carefully, that you can wipe out every enemy in the area. And I think that's just fantastic. What a random thing to put in. Stealth in a Resident Evil game. Now, Resident Evil 4 has always been sort of like the in-between as far as the horror element and the action part of Resident Evil. You can argue that Resident Evil 2 and 3 had the scares a little bit more. Well, I wouldn't say the remakes themselves have been necessarily scary at all. I don't really find these games scary anymore. The only thing that would actually scare me about the Resident Evil games a long time ago from like the PlayStation era was mostly because, well, I was a kid. And the controls, the tank controls actually were the scariest thing because those were the things that you was fighting the most.
Okay, it's game time.
But for the most part, even this remake has managed to make a very good balance between action and a little bit of suspenseful slash horror moments in certain areas of the game. As the game goes later on, just like the original Resident Evil 4, it starts getting more action oriented, especially when you start going up against the militarized enemies towards the end of the game as you go on to a new part of the island. So overall, I just have to say it's great. I think the game is fantastic. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't played it. I mean, if you played the original, you would know, but I'm just coming to find out, surprisingly enough, there's a lot of people that have not played the original, even though that's probably the most popular Resident Evil game and the most recognizable one. There's still a bunch of people that have not played it, and I don't know how many people have played this remake. It just recently came out, so I don't want to spoil too much on it. I don't want to talk too crazy about it. But I do say I highly recommend it. And for that one person that said that as time goes on, I will start to appreciate the Resident Evil 3 remake. I made a video on that already saying how I don't like it. This actually makes me hate it more, if anything, because it shows how much of a potential the Resident Evil 3 remake could have had if it was put in the time that the Resident Evil 4 remake has, or heck, even the Resident Evil 2 remake, which came out before the Resident Evil 3 one, which did a fantastic job. So this one's on the same par with the Resident Evil 2 remake, which I gave a solid 9 out of 10, I'm pretty sure. This one just goes above and beyond that, which is tough to do, but they still managed to do it. So thank you, Capcom, for releasing a very faithful game to the original, but modernizing and adding a couple of extra things. There were a few surprises in there from enemies that are not in the original, and anybody who played the original knows exactly these type of enemies that I'm talking about, these type of scenarios that I'm talking about. That was a very nice little surprise, Capcom. Was not expecting that. But overall, the Resident Evil 4 remake, I think it's great. My opinion still has not changed on the Resident Evil 3 remake, as far as me thinking that it's worse. But overall, really love the game. Really love the game. I'm actually playing through it again. After Mercenaries has been released, I heard that they're gonna actually do Ada's story, I think separate ways, which was a DLC that was with the original game. Before, it wasn't DLC, it used to just come fully with the game. Same thing with Mercenaries, but you know, we live in a modern gaming world where all that has to be DLC, all that has to be released later on. But it's free from what I've heard, at least I think Separate Ways might be free. I know the Mercenary mode is, and man, am I looking forward to playing some more Resident Evil 4 Remake. Well, that's all I got. Thank you for clicking on the video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Oh, and two more things. Thanks for adding an autosave feature, but also, come on, we need more mercenary stages than just 3. Come on, Capcom. We know you got more. You have more in the original. Let's do this.